Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is chew. Let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The most common way to hear people use the verb chew is to talk about biting something and working it in one's mouth. So you might think of that repeated action of biting and biting, making something smaller and ultimately easier to swallow and then digest. A second way the verb chew gets used can mean to gnaw at something persistently. So here, this second definition really isn't about using our teeth, but it evokes or it gives us kind of that same idea. So it's maybe a worry we have, something we feel a bit anxious about, and it can feel like that concern we have is biting and working on us. So that's how we get the second definition of this verb. For now, you should know that chew is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all I need to do is add ing, and that forms chewing. The past tense and the participle forms of this verb are made by adding ed. Our base verb, chew, ends with a vowel sound, and vowel sounds in English are always voiced sounds. This means our ed ending is just going to make a D sound. Okay? So I'm not going to add an extra syllable as I pronounce it. So the past tense and participle forms of our verb should sound like this. Chewed, chewed. Okay? Now I know we've just discussed two meanings of this verb, and there are actually a number of other ways to use chew, and that's in connection to phrasal verbs. So today's discussion will focus on some different phrasal verbs you might hear or see. The first one we'll discuss is to chew away at. Okay? When people use this, it can have a couple different meanings. One would be to chew at something repeatedly or to chew on it for a length of time. So an example of this might be, the baby chews away at the teething ring after every meal. Okay, so if you're a parent, if you've raised a small child, you might know at a certain age, right, the teeth start to appear, right, and that can be really painful, but it can help babies sometimes to have a little something to bite or chew on. So that's what that sentence is describing. And this example sentence, the baby chews away at, is an example of the simple present. We're talking about a habit or a routine. Now, a second way to use chew away at goes back to that second definition of the verb we spoke about just moments ago. So this is where something is gnawing at or bothering someone rather persistently. And again, it tends to happen as someone is worrying or feeling anxious about something. An example of this might be, his allegations have been chewing away at her all weekend. So allegation, many times we use this to talk about someone who is accusing another person of bad behavior. So here somebody maybe has said, you did this thing that was wrong, right? And now those words have been causing some woman here a lot of worry or anxious feelings. This example sentence, his allegations have been chewing away at her, is an example of the present perfect progressive or present perfect continuous, where we're talking about an action that started in the past and continuing into the present. The next phrasal verb we'll discuss is to chew on. This can also have a couple different meanings. One is literally to talk about biting something or gnawing on something. An example of this. Is the dog chewing on your shoe? Okay. This is an example of a present progressive or present continuous sentence. We're asking a question about something that may or may not be happening now. A second way to use chew on can mean to contemplate something. So that might be a new verb for some people. And I think of contemplate as thinking rather deeply about something, right? We're maybe thinking, this could happen, this would be good, this might be bad, kind of pros and cons. So an example of this meaning in a sentence might be, I'm going to chew on how to respond to this message for a while. Maybe you've heard somebody say something like this in a workplace environment, right? Maybe you're dealing with someone who's really angry or frustrated, and sometimes to write back quickly might mean we are also expressing some anger or frustration, which isn't always good. So this person's saying, I'm going to think about how to respond. Sometimes that's a really good plan. I'm going to chew on is an example of the simple future. This is our be going to. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to chew over. This can also have a couple different meanings. One might be to discuss something at length with another person. So, an example of this. She's been chewing the job over with her professors all week. Okay? This is another present perfect progressive sentence here. And it might mean that a student has received a job offer here, right? And maybe feels a little uncertain. Should I take it? Should I maybe not pursue it? Should I go to grad school or maybe take a different job, right? So this person has been discussing at length over the course of a week, what should I do? Let's talk about a second way to use chew over, and it's very similar to what we just discussed a couple minutes ago. So it can also mean to contemplate or think deeply about something. An example of this. He chewed over which college to attend, and he's finally made a decision. This is an example of a simple past tense sentence, right? We're talking about a completed action. So here, someone contemplated for a very long time, and now a decision has been made. The next phrasal verb you might encounter is very informal. So to chew out means to berate someone in a rather harsh or angry manner, right? So you might think of yelling at someone else, screaming at them. So an example of this in a sentence might be, the coach chewed the referee out over the missed call. Maybe you've seen this as you've watched a sporting event where a coach, a manager, someone is incredibly upset with something a referee or umpire either has or hasn't done, right? And they start yelling. And many times this can result in consequences for them. So I would encourage people to avoid chewing others out, but it does happen. So if you hear it now, you might better understand what people are describing. The last phrasal verb we'll discuss is to chew up. This can have a couple different meanings. The first, again, is to masticate. So again, think bite repeatedly in order to make something smaller. So a way you might hear this used, chew it up. Don't try to swallow such big bites. This is an example of an imperative, a command, and I imagine this is something many parents have said to their children, right? So here we're kind of encouraging, chew the food well before you try and swallow it so you don't choke. The last way you might hear chew up used can mean to cause destruction or injury. And many times this gets used with really powerful machines or objects. So let's take a look at how you might hear or see it. The machine will chew up any loose articles of clothing. Make sure that you wear protective gear. Right? So this might be suggesting, like if you have a shirt that's kind of open or loose, you have a scarf, something like that, right? This machine is going to kind of grab it and rip it apart, destroy it. It could also mean Like if your hand gets into that machine, it's going to injure it. It's going to hurt or possibly destroy it. So that's why we have that second kind of statement there warning us to wear something that will protect us. That machine will chew up is also an example of the simple future. So here someone is likely making a prediction about what they think will happen. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words and a phrase related to our verb of the day. The first word we're going to discuss is just the noun form of the word. The noun chew has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation. One way you might hear chew used can refer to the repeated biting or gnawing of something. So, an example of this in a sentence might be, perfectly cooked skirt steak still has a chew to it. Okay? So there are certain cuts of meat that might require one to bite or chew it more thoroughly. And I think that's kind of what this sentence is describing. A second way chew gets used is to refer to something that isn't food, but it is intended for someone or something to repeatedly bite or to chew. So, an example of how you might hear this used. They bought the dog a new chew toy. Right? So, remember that earlier sentence about the dog chewing on a shoe? Right? So sometimes to prevent that, people will buy special toys or objects that are safe and maybe can't be destroyed as easily for a dog to kind of get that urge out of their system without damaging other things. Another related word you might encounter is the adjective chewable. This describes something that is easy to cut or easy to chew. So you might think able to chew with that suffix. So an example of this. The kids prefer to have chewable vitamins. Right? So many times with medicine or other things, one will take a tablet or a pill, they'll swallow it. That can be difficult for some children, right? So there's another option of getting something that can be chewed and then swallowed. Another related thing you might encounter, the noun chewing gum, right? So this is something that's flavored. It's generally sold in packets, so you're not just buying a single piece, but it's something people will put in their mouth to sometimes keep them occupied, maybe to prevent them from eating other things. Some people like the different flavors. For some people, it might freshen their breath. But an example of this noun in a sentence might be, she got chewing gum stuck in her hair. So I know growing up, my parents always made sure no chewing gum before I went to bed because that was the perfect way to have it fall out and get stuck in one's hair. One last phrase for us to discuss today, it's to chew the fat. This is a really informal phrase that some people will use, and it just means kind of chatting in a very leisurely way. Many times people are sharing things they've heard, maybe news. Some might say it's a little connected to gossip as well, but how you might hear it used in a sentence could be, time to stop chewing the fat and get back to work. Right? So this might be a boss, a supervisor telling people, okay, enough chatting, right? Let's get back to doing our work. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.